We're in award season, which means a lot of really great games, a lot of really great RPGs are getting a lot of the recognition that they so richly deserve. But I figure what better time when all of your attention is on those great games to pull your attention to some that are not so great. That sounds bad. I don't mean like not good games. I'm fucking this up. What I mean to say is games that are worth noticing, but maybe not worth awards. Some of the games this year through 2025 that have released and maybe slid under the radar. Maybe you didn't notice that these games came out. And I think now is a good time to highlight them. These games aren't Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 or Split Fiction or Expedition 33, but they're still deserving of your attention. For this list, I picked 4 games and I tried to give a broad variety of RPG or RPG adjacent titles. Each of them I played this year and enjoyed for very different reasons, from dark side scrollers to bright wholesome titan climbing, from creepy fungus people to dungeons filled with undead. These games may not be award worthy, but they are at the very least backlog worthy. I'm not selling these well at all, so let's just go ahead and jump into them. First, we're going to start with Mandragora, Whispers of the Witch Tree. It is a dark fantasy side-scroller with challenging combat, an engaging story, deep builds, and beautiful aesthetics. But its launch was marred with confusion over its data collection policies, and the game largely went unnoticed by many. It's currently sitting at a mostly positive on Steam with 916 reviews and a respectable 77 on Metacritic. For many, the combat may be the draw here, but unfortunately that actually might be one of the weaker parts of the game, at least from where I played. The side-scroller part of that combat kinda held it back a bit for me, making it feel at times a little bit rough, a little bit repetitive, and a little bit clunky. What didn't feel clunky were the visuals, the sounds, the dark fantasy feel, and the engaging story. From the start, I was interested to find out where things would go with this dark and creepy story. The end result was somewhat uneven. This is not an all-time story, but it's still an engaging one. The game has shining moments and dull ones. This may very well be the first 2D side-scroller game to legitimately get me with jump scares in a haunted house in 2D.
Nice.
Mandragora to me is a game worth exploring, held back by its combat and at times repetitiveness, but it made its way onto this list largely because it feels like it should have gotten at least a little bit more of a look than it did. This may be more of an unknown RPG than an underrated RPG, but if you like side scrollers and if you like the whole idea of a kind of a Souls-like-esque version of that kind of side scroller combat, I think this would be a good game to try, especially if you like that dark, creepy aesthetic. And I just really like the painterly feel. Our next game on the list though is going to give you whiplash because it's so the polar opposite of Mandragora. We're talking about Eternal Strands, this bright and fun game. Eternal Strands was a refreshing action-adventure RPG more in line with Zelda and Shadow of Colossus than Dragon Age, despite coming from former BioWare dev Mike Laidlaw and the new studio Yellow Brick Games. Eternal Strands was their debut title, and it has a very positive review rating on Steam with 1,155 reviews and a 69 on Metacritic. Nice. In Eternal Strands, you play as Bryn, a magic weaver who's unraveling the mysteries of a cataclysmic event. While doing this, you'll dodge and dance around diverse biomes, utilize different types of elemental magics, and take on gigantic foes like Shadow of Colossus, climbing up and over them or dodging dragonfire. It plays a lot like a smaller scale Breath of the Wild with a charming story, an engaging and likable cast of characters who you learn more about bit by bit as you progress through the game's story. It's not an RPG with a ton of moral choices choices or depth, and it can get repetitive by the time you've climbed your 3rd or 4th giant, but the game improved with free patches and free DLCs post-launch, and it was a bright spot early on in the year for me, and a game I still recommend if you're trying for a more compact, lighter, and gentler RPG. Using magic to hurl shrapnel at enemies, or throwing enemies at enemies, or throwing them off cliffs, well, it can get pretty damn addicting. Or maybe I'm just like a little bit cruel and twisted, I don't know. Weaving might be the key component to this game that kind of sets it apart. Throughout your time in the game, you get several different types of weaving, from elemental companions to ice bridges. Telekinesis-like powers for lifting and hurling anything from rocks to entire apple carts at your enemies, or throwing them off of cliffs, or against walls to stun them, and then beating them with your sword. The weaving takes advantage of a physics-based system, and the world itself seems like your playground the more you advance through your weaving. Hell, you can even use your weaver's grasp to catch fireballs and hurl them back at your foes. Although I will admit, just getting that one little bit of footage was it was kind of I failed a lot at it. You know what? Fine. Here, this is the behind the scenes of trying to catch that one fireball. It was a fun game, and it's one of those games that after playing it, it made me excited to see what the studio does next. So I'm excited to see what comes next from Yellow Brick Games. But from these bright, colorful, hopeful tones, let's go somewhere a little bit darker, somewhere a little bit sadder, somewhere a little bit more depressing. Let's go to England. Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon is a first-person open-world RPG based on dark Arthurian legend. It's beautifully creepy and cruel, it's engaging, and it's one of my favorite RPGs of 2025, having fully released this year after several in early access. It's currently sitting at a very positive rating on Steam with just over 12,000 reviews, and it has a very respectable 80 overall on Metacritic. Tainted Grail is a AA experience that's painfully close to being AAA. It's got beautiful visuals, fun frenetic combat, great RPG systems, and an engaging story. It just doesn't have all the polish and depth of a AAA game. It doesn't take those things as far as one of those games would. But that doesn't mean it's not worthy of your time. I spent hours upon hours in this game roaming across the overland areas or delving into dungeons, dying quite a bit because I'm actually quite shit at first-person combat, but really enjoying myself all the same. It's an RPG where you can really sort of build out your character from scratch, going the stealth route, the spellcasting and summoning route, or the big old two-hander route. Really, whatever strikes your fancy. I think the best way to describe Tainted Grail is a dark Arthurian open world RPG made by people who love open world RPGs. There's a lot of attention to detail with tons of little mysteries to discover all throughout the world and interesting characters to meet and potentially murder. For example, this chap here is busy hacking away at this statue of King Arthur. Pleasant enough, bloke. I come around the corner though and see that there's some copper ore to mine. Well, but I need a pickaxe. And well, wouldn't you know it, but our bald friend over here happens to have just that. And now, well, now I have procured a pickaxe. And no one has to know how. I guess what you could think of in Tainted Grail is there's only a crime if there's a witness. Tainted Grail is the kind of game I think if it had released in 2024, a leaner year, it would have made an even bigger splash than it did. Not to say that 12,000 reviews on Steam isn't a pretty big splash, it is. But I think the same could be said for our next game, Avowed. And this game, I think this game is one of those games that's gonna go down for me as a game that was muted by greed. Avowed is our last game on this list, and it's an interesting one because I think the main thing that did this game in was its price tag. Avowed is a fantastic RPG, one of the top ones of this year that was extremely overpriced. If Avowed had released at $50 or maybe even $60, I think a lot more people would have played it and enjoyed it. When you bump it up to $70 though, you're expecting an experience that is much more than what Avowed delivers. Avowed is a good RPG, but it's not a fantastic, amazing $70 RPG. It didn't help that Avowed was going up against, say, $60, $50 RPGs that exceeded it this year. Hopefully, Obsidian and Microsoft learned that because they did lower the price for Outer Worlds 2 later in the year. Avowed from Obsidian Entertainment is currently sitting at mostly positive on Steam with just over 8,000 reviews and has a Metacritic score of 80. Avowed is a charming RPG that's more confined than you might like, but also more open than you might expect. It toes a line between almost delivering on everything you might want, but often pulls back just before it does. What it does very well, though, is provide a very rewarding and exciting story, great visuals, very fun and engaging combat, and compelling characters, with one major exception, which we'll get to here in just a sec. What it doesn't do is continue to build on the depths of those characters, provide players with enough agency despite having some hefty choices to make, or avoid at times making the story feel rushed, especially toward the end. But that major character, that issue, the primary antagonist of Avowed, at least to me, is very bland. I don't know what it was, I just didn't believe any of their inspirations at all. They just felt like one of the blandest main antagonists I've seen in an RPG in a long time, and that kind of dampened the whole experience for me. The other parts of the game, I enjoyed a lot of the side quests in this game. I enjoyed a lot of this in general. It surpassed games to me, Dragon's Dogma 2, this surpassed that, but it sits underneath a couple other games, and the antagonist is a big part of it. Avowed is an RPG where you'll find yourself dabbling in different class builds, exploring different nooks and crannies, and finding some of the most rewarding exploration this year. It's also already rumored that a sequel has been greenlit, so this won't be the last time we visit Aora. One of the hopes I have is if that sequel becomes a thing, kind of like with Outer Worlds 2, they take a step up when they do it. They took a step up from Outer Worlds 1. We get a bit more. We take things a bit further. I know Obsidian has a kind of an idea of not pushing too far and keeping their teams lean, but I think that they can push things further than they did with Avowed, do just a bit more than they did, and maybe have a more compelling antagonist. I mean, there's really only one thing we can do, right? we gotta. Oh, fuck!
You're one of those people who takes requests, not orders, aren't you?
Shut up, Kai. But those are my games that I think are a little bit underrated, or like mainly in the first two, unknown this year, that I think are worth at least putting on your wish list or considering picking up on sale or something like that. They're games that I think that I had a decent amount of fun playing. And so once you're done playing all the games, getting awards, maybe circle back to these. My name is Redbeard Flynn. Thank you so much for watching this wildly weird video idea that I don't know why I decided to make it now. But hey, you watched it. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day.